So in this semester, as I told you, I will be teaching you sociolinguistics module. The main reference we're going to use is this one. So please, can you take notes? Introducing sociolinguistics. Introducing Sociolinguistics by Miriam Mayer-Hoff. So, as you know, of course, so after you take your notes, introducing sociolinguistics, Miriam Mayer-Hoff. Okay, so of course, the book is in the classes, so what we're going to do is cover guidelines, okay, the main concepts, the guidelines of this module, which is called sociolinguistics. But for you, of course, to deepen your knowledge, okay, to go for further details, you need to, refer to this book. So you read, and then for complementing what we have in the lectures, okay? Because we can't cover everything in the lecture, so you have to read further details, examples, etc. in the book. Good. So concerning the syllabus, okay, what we're going to cover during the semester. So generally speaking, we will cover the main concepts in this field, okay? The concepts that are found in this field. So first of all, we will start with a kind of discussion about the scope of linguistics. Okay? That is to say, we're going to see what sociolinguistics tries to deal with, what sociolinguistics tries to investigate. Because as you know, generally speaking, we have the major general branch is linguistics. That's what you are specialized in now, right? But of course, in linguistics, there are other major sub-branches, okay? There are what we call core linguistics or core sub-branches of linguistics, the main branches of sociolinguistics, of linguistics, that deal basically with the investigation of how language is produced and how language is uttered by a human being. So in these major core linguistic sub-branches, so what do we have? And that's what you have in your courses, in your other modules. So you have like phonetics, phonology, morphology, okay, syntax, before we go there. So these are the core main sub-branches of linguistics because they are, or they focus on the language itself, nothing else. How a human being tries or utters language, produces language, okay? So phonetics, so what do? You have the manner of articulation, you have the places of articulation, you have the vocal tracts, all that kind. And then you move on into phonology in order to see how we combine sounds together. Then you move on to morphology, into seeing how parts of a word are combined. That is to say, how morphemes are combined. Okay, because one word can be one morpheme or can be many morphemes. You remember? For example, want, wanted. Want is one morpheme, and then you have another morpheme, which is the past participle ed. So how morphemes are combined into one word. And then you move on into syntax, which deals with the sentence, how different words are combined together to form one sentence. So you see, so far we're just dealing with language, okay? We're not moving outside of language. So how a human being produces language, right? And that's what I told you they are called or referred to in the field as the core sub-branches of linguistics, right? Then you have other, they are also important, okay, but they are not considered as core because we move on into other variables that have to do with something out of the language itself. For example, since this is our module we are dealing with now, so we have sociolinguistics. So in sociolinguistics, so that's what we're going to try to cover next time. So I'm not just trying to introduce things for you. So we'll see what is the scope of linguistics. What does sociolinguistics try to do? Okay? That is to say, what is the aim of sociolinguistics? So the aim of sociolinguistics, we will see that. So it is, we have two words there. We have society and we have language or linguistics. So we will see how the two components affect each other, how society affects language. And in this regard comes what will come, yes, the relationship between society and language. So when we deal with the relationship between society and language, so we're going to have many concepts there. The sociolinguists who have been interested in this sub-branch, sociolinguistics, have come up during their investigations, during their research, they have come up with a number of concepts. Okay? And that's what we'll cover later on. For example, one concept which is language variation. Right? So you have a sociolinguist, what does he do? He tries to investigate language, the relationship between society and language, right? Now, in this regard, they have found when dealing with collecting data, you know, data, the story data. So that is to say, data about how people use language. They have found that there is what we call language variation. And we will see the details later on. I'm just trying to explain the concept for the moment, briefly, but we will see the details in our upcoming lectures, because we will stop at each one of them. Okay? For example, like in Morocco, we know that there is language variation, right? For example, if you here in Sus, okay, so we have two languages. There is Amazigh and there is Moroccan Arabic. Another kind of variation, if you go to the north, you will find Tarifit or Tashlhit, Moroccan Arabic. Then inside Moroccan Arabic itself, okay, you have some kind of language variation. There is what we call the Fasi dialect. There is what we call the Kazawi dialect, Marrakshi dialect. And then if you move into the Sahara, the desert, you have another kind of dialect, which is Hassaniya. So that's what we call language variation. And this is just generally speaking, because there are a lot of details in there, which we will see in detail in our upcoming lectures. So you know now what we mean by language variation. So the next thing we're going to cover, language and dialects. The distinction between language and dialect. So we'll see what is a language, what is the definition of language. We will see what is the definition of a dialect and what are the differences between the two. What are the criteria that we can rely on in order to call a variety a language, and the criteria we can rely on in order to call another variety a dialect. For example, we have Moroccan Arabic. It's a dialect. And then we have Standard Arabic. It's a language. Okay? So there are distinctions in there. So we will see that, language and dialect. We will talk about another concept introduced in the field, which is called standardization. Standardization, because many communities in the world, not only, okay, many communities in the world, not only in Morocco, they have gone through this step, this process, the standardization process, right? Now, standardization, because in the past, in many communities, there were what we call like dialects, for example, like French, it didn't come just like that as a standard language. Before, there were many dialects in France, in the north, in the south, and so on, like Morocco, like Moroccan Arabic of Fassi, Marrakechite, etc. But a bit quite more different than each other, right? And then by the time when they started the officialization of the government, and the government needs a kind of official language, so they were talking and they found a kind of discussion there, issue there. What is going to be our language? So then there is a discussion, a debate in the community. They selected one dialect, and that dialect was standardized, and we will see what are the things we do in standardization in details when we come to our upcoming lectures. They selected that dialect and they adopted it as the official language. So one of the things, for example, we do in standardization is writing books, codification of that language, the grammar, what is the grammar of that language, or writing novels, literature. So that's part of standardization process, right? Now this is what we will see again in detail when we come to it. Another concept we will have to deal with is binoculars, because there are standard language, and then there are vernaculars. They are similar to dialects, but it's a kind of different concept to refer to dialects. So the vernacular is the language we use in informal contexts, and then you have a standard languages which we use in formal contexts. So this is another concept to make a distinction between a dialect and a standard language, right? Then we have the story of accent. You know that we have one language, right? Like Moroccan Arabic, right? For example, we have Qa, okay? And then in some areas, like in Fes, they pronounce it different. They have their own accent of pronouncing that sound, right? And this refers to accent, to the story of accent. For example, you are belonging to a department of English, right? And you know that English, of course, is spoken in the United States or in England as a first language. Now, people in the United States, they don't pronounce English the same way. There are differences between people, okay? The people in the north are not like the people near Texas, and so there are different accents. So it's one language, but the pronunciation and the tone and the intonation can be different from one area to another. And that refers to the story of, or the concept of, accent, right? So we will see that in detail. Speech community, another concept we will deal with, right? So speech community is another concept they introduced by sociolinguists when studying language, the relationship between language and society. And speech community refers to a group of people speaking one variety of language. For example, here in Sousse, there is a speech community of Sousse people, okay? Speaking, for example, Amazigh, that's a speech community. There are different degrees of speech communities. Then we can talk about Moroccan community, speech community, okay? Because they have one dialect which is called Moroccan Arabic. So there are different levels of speech communities, okay? So you understand what we mean by speech community. So it's a group of people having together, speaking together one kind of language variety. And they, of course, they have kind of common culture, etc. Right? Another concept we will deal with is idiolect. It comes in the right spot in there. Because speech community, you are dealing with a group of people speaking one kind of language variety, right? And idiolect is a kind of language variety specific to one person, right? For example, me, I have my own way of speaking. You have your own way of speaking. Not only, of course, we have common things in terms of accent, etc. But the way I speak, some people, okay, language he uses, the style, etc. So that's called an idiolect. Because this is also found in speech communities. When you go into the details of a speech community, into the individuals, we have this concept called idiolect. It's a kind of dialect, it's a kind of language variety that is spoken by individual person. Because there are some minor differences between people, individuals inside the speech community. Despite the fact that they can have common things inside the speech community. Okay? So you have the speech community, it's a group of people having one language variety. Inside the speech community, you have idiolects. Each one of you has got his own way of speaking, etc. Accent, intonation, and so on. So far, so good. So these are some of the concepts we will deal with. Another one is called linguistic repertoire. So linguistic repertoire, it is defined by sociolinguists as the totality of the linguistic skills and vocabulary that are mastered by a particular individual and that enable him to communicate with others. Gumper's 1964. In other words, it refers to the skills, your own skills. Look at you, at yourself, okay? You have a kind of linguistic repertoire. You have a kind of skills, a number of skills in your mind, okay, in your vocal tract, etc., that you use in order to communicate with people. When I'm communicating to you now, what am I using? I'm using my linguistic repertoire, my skills, my words, my terminology, my syntax, my phonology, my morphology, my sociolinguistics, my etc. It's a kind of competence I have inside my mind that enables me, enables you, enables anyone in the world to communicate efficiently with people, to make himself or herself understood. Okay? And that's why you can notice that there are some people who have problems to communicate. Maybe has a problem somewhere in the vocal tract, maybe has a problem in the brain, so they can't communicate, right? So that is due to the linguistic repertoire. So linguistic repertoire is the kind of competence, skills that you have in order to speak to others. So this is another concept. We will see the details later on. Another concept is called register. Register, again, it's a kind of language variety, one kind of language variety that is common among people sharing the same job or the same occupation. I repeat. Register is a kind of language variety that is common among people sharing the same kind of job and the same kind of occupation. For example, if you sit down, if you speak to doctors, when you are sick, you go to a doctor. So you notice that their terminology, they have a kind of register, a kind of language variety that they share together in terms of vocabulary, etc. Okay? Yeah? Yeah, particular terminology they share together. So that language variety is called a kind of register. The same thing for mechanics. If you are not a mechanic, and then you sit among these people, so you notice that they have their own jargon, their own vocabulary, their own terminology, that they are common among them because of their job. So that's referred to, that kind of language variety is called register. Same thing for teachers, okay? Same thing for other jobs. Good? Yes, sir?
It's also jargon.
Yes, they have their own jargon. Jargon refers to the vocabulary, but register refers to their language variety. Okay? In their language variety, because they have the same job, because they have the same occupation, they share similar jargon, similar vocabulary. Okay? Similar terminology, as you have mentioned. So that is register. So we'll see it as well. Language and social contexts. Right? And that's maybe the core, another aspect of the core of sociolinguistics, because in the word you have sociolinguistics, so you have the word society, or other words, social context, and then you have linguistics, language, the relationship between language and society. So we will deal with what is the relationship between language and social context. How can social context affect language? Let me give you an example briefly, but we'll see the details later on. Now you are in a classroom. You are students, you are good students, listening, attentive, etc. And you have a good teacher explaining. So it's different from another context when you are together in a cafe. Cafe is another kind of context, social context, right? So if you notice the way you speak in a classroom and the way you speak in a cafe, it's different. So that's one way how, okay, language or social context affects language, okay? Social context, okay? You have here formal, informal, social context. So that's another concept we will deal with. We will see also occupation, how occupation affects language, the role of occupation, the impact of occupation on language. And we have already seen that when talked about register. Because in sociolinguistics, one of the main things we talk about is the impact of social variables, is the impact of social variables on language. This is a broader concept, the impact or definition. Impact of social variables on language. And in social variables, there are different variables. One of them we have seen here is social context, is one variable. Another social variable that has a role that affects the use of language is occupation in the form of what is called a register. For example, you'll see that a mechanic speaks differently from a doctor, speaks differently from a football player, and so on and so forth. Okay? The mode of discourse okay. So the mode of discourse, another concept we will deal with, and it deals with the difference, of course, between oral language and written language. Right? So this is another way how language is different, okay? Can be different. Oral language and written language. So you know that written language is much more formal, clearer, organized, etc. And oral communication or oral language is less organized, informal, full of mistakes, etc. So we'll see the details about how the mode of discourse, written versus oral, can affect language. And what are the manifestations of that effects, influence? Okay? What are the things? So for example, I told you there's an oral communication full of mistakes. I mean, not full, but there can be mistakes. Okay? Not like written language. Written language is refined, correct, etc. Another variable that also affects language can be topic. So we will see that, and we'll see how the topic can affect the use of language. Yes, as a topic, it's subject or topic in general. I'm sure that among yourselves, when you are studying, for example, your modules, your subjects, you will find that there is more English. But, for example, if you shift to football, Real Madrid, or whatever kind of team that is dear to you, so the language can be different, right? When you are revising together linguistics or sociolinguistics or whatever, you tend to use more English. So that's the effect of, or the influence of topic on your language. Okay? So, topic. Another variable that we will deal with, and see how it can affect language and what are the manifestations of that influence on language. Interlocutor, another kind of variable, so another kind of concept and variable we will deal with, and that affects language as well. Okay? An interlocutor simply refers to the person to whom you are speaking. The person to whom you are speaking, the person you are addressing. The receiver of your message, the hearer. Okay? Now, of course, if your interlocutor is your friend, your language is going to be different if your interlocutor is the teacher, is your father, is your mother. So the language can be different on the basis of the interlocutor, who you are addressing. Okay? So you can see, while we are going through these concepts, that each one shows how society affects language. Okay? Because this is the main purpose of sociolinguistics, to see the relationship between society and language, and how society, social variables do affect the way we speak, the way we use language in general. Another variable that also it is related to the previous one we have seen, language and social context. It is formal versus informal context. Like the context of a classroom and the context of a cafe, or context of a football field when you are playing football with your friends. So the language can be different depending on the formality of the context where you are. If you are in a formal context, your language will be different from when you are in an informal context. Restricted versus elaborated codes. It's a terminology that is introduced by Bernstein 1971-1973, and it simply refers to the code, the kind of code you can use in informal context, and the kind of code or language variety you use in a formal context. So according to this man, Bernstein, 1971-1973, he claims that in an informal context we use what he refers to as a restricted code. And in a formal context we use what he refers to as an elaborated code. Restricted code, it means limited, with mistakes, etc. But elaborated code, it means to a better style, better language, better vocabulary, no mistakes, elaborated code. So that's the meaning of these two codes here, okay? So in an informal context, he says that we use a restricted code, a restricted kind of language variety, and in a formal context, we use a kind of elaborated code. Look, for example, at written and oral communication. In written communication, you see refined vocabulary, better style, okay, better organization, no mistakes. But in that's elaborated code. But then if you have an informal or oral communication, it can be full of mistakes. There is no organization. People sometimes speak about X, then at some point they go to speak about Y, and another time they speak about another topic, M, etc. So there is less organization. The language, it can be contain mistakes, right, and so on and so on. That's a restricted code. So we will see this concept of, again, of restricted versus elaborated codes. Language and the individual speaker, and this refers to Dialect story. And in this regard, we will see the following concepts. We will refer to language or regional varieties. Regional varieties. And that refers to the example I gave you in the beginning. If you go to Fez, or if you go to Marrakesh, or for example, generally speaking, if you go from a rural area, urban area, you go to a rural area, you can see that the language is different. Okay, so those are regional varieties. So the environment where the language is spoken can affect language. That's why in urban areas, different language variety from rural areas. So those are regional varieties. The same thing if you go to Fez, if you go to Morocco, the same thing if you go to Rif, Atlas Mountains, etc. So you have different varieties of Arabic, different varieties of Amazigh, and that has to do with region. The same thing for Amazigh. If you go to Rif, you have Tarifit in the region of the north. That's a region. Then you have Tashlhit in the middle area of the Atlas Mountains, and then here in the south you have Amazigh. Okay, so those are regional varieties, language varieties that have to do different on the basis of region, right? Social varieties. Yes, please. Social varieties. Please. Young lady, can you sit down? We're going to finish and then you can leave. Yeah. Thank you. Social varieties. Another concept we will see that has to do with language and the individual speaker. And as you know, in an urban area, so you have social kind of stratification. Let's say you have different categories of families. You have the poor, then you have the middle, and then you have the rich, right? That's what we call socioeconomic status. Now the people belonging to the high socioeconomic status, compare their language with the people from the popular areas, poor, okay, language. So of course there are differences in the way they use language. So you will notice, for example, that those people, high economic status, use a lot of refined kind of dialectal Arabic somehow, and they mix it with a lot of French, right? Yeah, kind of prestige, kind of, okay? But if you go to the popular areas, they just focus on Moroccan Arabic or Tamazight, or, okay, less French mixed with that. So again, here, this is what we mean by social varieties. So we will see the details of that. Sex varieties, gender varieties, and this simply has to do with man versus women. The way men speak differs from the way women speak, somehow. Okay, there are some differences. So you see here again another impact of a social variable on the way we use language. We will see the details again, as I told you. Ethnic varieties. Yeah, yes? Yeah, it has to do with somehow with religion, but simply it has to do with the race, ethnic race. For example, yes, Amazigh, and then you have the Arabophones. Amazigh and then you have the Arabophones, okay? Now these are two ethnic races, and their language is different because of the difference in their ethnic races. The Arabophones, they speak Arabic, and the Amazigh they speak Amazigh in general, depending on, okay, whatever they are. So you see again another manifestation of the impact of a social variable here, which is here ethnic race, on the way language is used. Other concepts we will deal with are diglossia. I need to mention something else in there since we are talking about diglossia, because there some people also talk about another concept which is triglossia now. Okay, diglossia, triglossia, bilingualism, and code switching. So we'll deal with bilingualism, definition of bilingualism, and multilingualism, as in our country. For example, we are a multilingual country. We are not a bilingual country, yes? Right? Bilingual country, you have only two languages spoken, standard languages spoken. But in a multilingual country like ours, we have more than two languages spoken. We have Arabic, Amazigh, and then we have French, English, Spanish. Some people have also German, etc. So bilingualism has to do with language, while diglossia, triglossia has to do with, they have to do with dialects. Dialects, but also languages. Dialects and languages. In bilingualism, multilingual, we just deal with languages. That's why you have bilingualism. Language word, the word language is in there. Multilingualism, okay? But here we are dealing with, of course, languages and dialects. For example, Morocco is a kind of diglossic speech community because we have what we call as standard language, standard Arabic, and we have the vernacular, which is Moroccan Arabic. The high variety, as we're going to see in the details, and the low variety. The high variety of the standard language, standard Arabic, is used in formal context, parliaments, classes, newspapers, TV, etc. And the low variety, the vernacular, Moroccan Arabic, is used in informal context, cafe, at home, etc. Okay? Triglossia is a newly emerging situation in the sense that now we have a new kind of variety that is developing according to the people who are advocating this kind of concept. They say that between Moroccan Arabic and Standard Arabic there is now a new emerging variety which is Middle Moroccan Arabic, and this is spoken mainly by educated people like you, like teachers, you people who have reached university level or high school level. They have studied a lot of Standard Arabic, and they have read a lot of Standard Arabic, and they listen to a lot of Standard Arabic. So their Moroccan Arabic is different from the Moroccan Arabic you can see in the rural area. If you go to the rural area where they speak Moroccan Arabic, and you speak to them, and then they speak to you, you see that there is a difference between you and them. You are educated, so your Moroccan Arabic tends to include a lot of jargon or vocabulary from Standard Arabic. Okay, there is a lot of impact of Standard Arabic on your Moroccan Arabic. So your Moroccan Arabic tends to go near Standard Arabic. Okay? While the Moroccan Arabic of the people in the rural areas, their Moroccan Arabic tends to go low level, okay? Go far from Standard Arabic into near Moroccan Arabic. So that's a kind of middle Moroccan Arabic. And therefore, because of these three varieties, Moroccan Arabic, Middle Moroccan Arabic, Standard Arabic, they are talking about this concept called triglossia. So we'll see the details as well. Finally, where we will see code switching. Code switching, you know, when you mix codes, like when you are speaking, you can use words from French, you can use words from a mixture of Amazigh and Arabic, or Amazigh and French, or Arabic and French, Arabic and English, or Amazigh and English, and so on and so forth. So mixing of codes, switching of codes at different levels, which we will see later. Other concepts we will deal with are Pigeons, Creoles, and Lingua Francas. Okay? Pigeons, Creoles, and Lingua Francas. They are concepts we will see later. So, for example, as a kind of introduction, so you have pigeons. These lingua francas, creoles, pigeons, they all have to deal with the contacts in the field or in the domains of business, the contacts between different people in the field of business, commerce, trade. So, for example, there are some places where you can see two speech communities, they trade together. And one speech community speaks a kind of language that is different from the other speech community. So what happens in that kind of situation of language contact is that they try to codify, to create a new kind of variety that is a kind used only for that purpose of trade between those two speech communities. Okay, they try to take some words from this one, another words from that language variety, and then use it together for trading. And that's a pigeon. Okay, and usually the pigeons, they are kind of simplified varieties, simplified. They are simple, they don't use a lot of grammar, it's very simple language that focuses only on the elements that are being traded, bought, and sold. So you don't use that variety, for example, that pigeon, you will not find people using it for love, right? You will not find it between people when talking about football. It's only used in that area of trade when they are trading together, selling and buying between each other.
It's like language, military.
Language?
Military.
Language of?
Military.
No, this one has to do only with business. Business. Okay, military, that's different. That's a kind of code, maybe they use it for their own purposes. But this one is used only when there is a contact between two communities, and these two communities, they have different language, and then they have to buy and sell among each other. They have to do business, they have to do trade, commerce. And how are we going to do that? So what they tend to do is to create this kind of pigeon that focuses on the elements they sell and buy, okay? And that's a simple kind of pigeon. Then you have creoles. Creoles is a kind of developed variety of the pigeon. So you have pigeons, simplified, but then by the time, by development, by of course, by the time, this kind of pigeon develops in the sense that between these two speech communities, by the time 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, there will be some children who will be born and learn to speak that language from birth. And then the language tries to develop, not only be specific to trade and commerce, into using it in other fields, other purposes. So it's a kind of language, becomes a kind of language. So it's a kind of developed variety of a pigeon. A pigeon is a simple variety, which is limited to just business. Simple vocabulary, simple grammar. But then by the time it tends to develop into more vocabulary, more grammar, more fields, more domains where it can be used, and that's a Creole. And then you will have also children learning that language. Lingua francas is the case of English now, where you have Moroccans, businessmen, and Moroccans in general. And then when they are doing research, or when they are doing business, or when they are doing conferences or whatever, with other people, like for example in China or whatever, there is now this kind of English that is spoken between, used as a lingua franca. Okay, it's a kind of language that is used by different speech communities having different languages in order to communicate, to do business or to do conference or research or whatever. So this is what we will cover in detail in the forthcoming classes. Okay?